Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we are going to present on diversity outreach strategies. I'm Dr. Nicholas Nelson Goddard from Florida PTA's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Committee. And joining me in presenting is April Cobb, also on the Florida PTA Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Committee. But before we dive in, let's get a word from our president, Ms. Carolyn Nelson Goddard.
Thank you, Nicholas. Good evening, everyone. I'm really glad to see you here, especially glad for those people who came back because they realize how important a topic this is and how important it is for us to be reaching out to our communities to ensure that our PTAs reflect our schools and the surrounding community and that we are embracing everyone. I'd like to take a moment to introduce the members of the Executive Committee and the Board of Directors who are here with us, especially now that we know who the second Karen was. All right, first Karen Mazzola. I'm going to introduce everyone in the order that I see them on my screen so that I don't miss anyone. Karen Mazzola, please introduce yourself with your name and your title.
Thank you. I'm Karen Mazzola, Vice President of Educational Development, and this wonderful presentation comes to you from the Education Commission. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Melanie Williams.
Good evening, everyone. I'm your Florida PTA Secretary, and it is always a pleasure being with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiffany Graham.
Good evening. I'm the County Council President of Duval County.
Thank you. Of course, somebody moved. Crystal Hayes.
How are you? Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity again. So sorry for the first time as well. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. I think that's all of the executive committee members and board members we have right now, but we do have our compliance director from the Florida PTA office, Kimberly Adamski, with us as well.
Hi, everyone. So good to see you all.
Thank you, Kimberly. Again, thanks for being here, everyone. I know that you will enjoy this presentation and you may have lots and lots of questions, and I'm sure that this committee will welcome them at the end of the presentation. Thanks again. Back to you, Nick.
Thank you. Yes, we look forward to questions and comments. It's good to dive in, but it's also good to get some of the groundwork or ground presentation of some of these central ideas. So let's get started. And go. So when you think about the PTA, we have to first have a grounding in terms of the mission statement, which would be to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families, communities to advocate for all children. And to accomplish this, we would need inclusion of all parents and all other stakeholders in the community, which requires reaching out to all of the different diverse groups within our communities. So if we think about this, we can think about diversity outreach, and this would be an intentional effort to engage and involve people from a variety of different backgrounds, communities. And with this, we're not simply thinking of race and ethnicity, which are certainly an important part, but we're also thinking of all kinds of life experiences, which are important in terms of framing people's perspectives. So to have diversity outreach, we would try to foster inclusivity, representation, and equal opportunities within PTA. So it involves both activities outside of our organization, as well as trying to make sure that internally we're operating in such a way that everyone feels as if they can be a part of it and can contribute.
The benefits of diversity outreach. So we know that it's very important for us to all inclusively be involved in this much needed work. So in order to do so, we must increase community engagement and participation. And we do that, number one, by, starting out with inclusivity, making sure that everyone feels welcome, and try to encourage them to be as active and engaged as much as they are comfortable with doing so. Enhance the decision making through diverse perspectives and experiences. And again, that goes back to encouraging and supporting individuals where they are as it relates to being involved in whatever activity it may be, currently at the school level, at the county level, and, moving up in the ranking. And ideally improving the cultural competencies within PTA. There are, a lot of misconceptions with anything in any organization. So it's very important to be capable of, identifying the importance of respecting everyone's culture and, taking a deep dive in understanding, what's important for you may not necessarily be important for others, but that everyone's perspective and culture is important. And we want to make sure that we have a greater understanding and support for the needs of all families. One family set of needs definitely does not always mirror someone else's set of family's needs. So we have to be encouraging and supporting in all areas of that, and making sure we never make anyone feel as though that their needs or their voices, so to speak, are not important. And when we do that, we strengthen relationships between the PTA and the diverse communities. My role as a member of the Florida PTA DEIJ subcommittee is to foster an inclusive and equitable environment with the organization. I try to do this by collaborating with committee members, PTA members, and the community with a hyper focus in ensuring that all families and students in Florida schools are supported and represented. And we know that that's very important for, just individuals, in general. We all want to feel as though that we are important and valued in any space that we enter. And we do that by making sure that we champion inclusivity and diversity for both within and outside of PTA. Nothing works when you're working, in silos. So it's important that when you are part of PTA, and even for those that may not necessarily be a part of PTA yet, that we build those bridges between the PTA and the different cultural groups in order to, have more individuals support or champion the overall goal, which is to meet the needs of children. And that's include all children. And we do that by way of communicating the value of diversity within the PTA and to the wider community.
So in conducting this diversity outreach, it's important to identify the groups that you should reach out to. And this is important because you want to ensure that you have diversity within your PTAs that balance representation within your communities. This can include race and ethnicity, but also think of language, can think of socioeconomic status, which often gets overlooked, where especially members of working class and working poor are less likely to receive attention and less likely to receive outreach activity. So that has to be a concern. As well, you can think of some of the historic representation within PTA, where we see that PTA has been especially representative in terms of the white non-Hispanic community, whereas other groups have been have had less representation. It's been improving because of many of the DEIJ efforts over the past few decades, but nonetheless, the legacy is still there, and the idea is still there in many pockets of the community, which has to be overcome. So in reaching out to these groups as well, it's important to identify some of the unique needs faced by the different groups, as mentioned previously, and to try to recognize what some of the potential barriers for engagement are. And some of these barriers can include differences, misunderstandings, culturally speaking, but they can also include some examples of historical trauma, trauma broadly speaking, or trauma specifically related to the educational setting. So we should all try to tailor our outreach efforts to address these specific concerns and specific needs towards the target groups. And they vary pretty significantly. So that's why it's important to try to identify what the target groups are. One way to do this would be to have demographic analysis of your community. You can research this information online. We are in a revolution in terms of the amount of information that exists. It increases by leaps and bounds every year. You can easily determine many of the demographics in your community, for instance, by going to the US Census Bureau and getting information there, where you can see some of the racial and ethnic splits. You can also get information in terms of socioeconomics, in terms of household and individual incomes. But aside from that, you can also get information on enrollment statistics, which will be important. You can also examine language preferences within schools, as well as the demographics within the school setting. So all of those will be important to take a look at, so that you can ideally have a PTA that is balanced in terms of your school and your community, where you would have representation equally based off of these identities and experiences.
So to be in alignment with everything that Nicholas just said, it's very important to understand the unique needs of all the children that we support in our local PTAs. So in order to do so, it's very important to understand the importance of conducting focus groups or surveys to gather input from diverse community members. A lot of the information that Nicholas mentioned, you can find on your Florida Department of Education's website. It is kind of challenging to navigate in some instances when you first go onto the website. But if you take the time to kind of educate yourself in the different areas and tabs that are available to you, you will find that a lot of the information that you may be searching for as it relates to your specific county, then diving deeper into the specific demographics is all there on the website. If you listen to the concerns and priorities and expectations of the different groups, you will hear their collective voices and individual voices as it relates to the unique needs that they are speaking to for their specific school sites and for their specific individual families. Understanding unique challenges and barriers faced by specific communities is important. And it's important to get other communities or other PTAs to understand that just because your family or your community is not undergoing a specific challenge or barrier, it does not mean that you leave them isolated to do the work on their own. It's important to collaborate with them and support them in their efforts to identify how to address the unique challenges and barriers faced by their communities. Recognizing that cultural nuances and values that may impact engagement, that goes in line with what I just basically said. A lot of times, you will find that within PTAs, there are individuals that are part of the actual PTA, but they never say a lot. And it's not because they don't have anything to say. Sometimes they are just shy, so to speak, or they feel that what they bring to the table might not necessarily be welcome by the collective individuals that are the majority representation of that PTA. So again, it's very important that we, again, embrace one another. It's very important that we tailor outreach efforts to address the diverse perspectives and needs of target groups. And in a nutshell, that's just what I covered above.
So you'll find different cultural nuances in reaching out to different groups. And one of the important takeaways from this would be the impact of inclusive messaging. You want to use language and tone that is both representative and inclusive of multiple cultures, and to try to use inclusive language and avoid stereotypes to the greatest extent possible. So you want to often get feedback from the different groups that you're reaching out towards, so that if you get anything, so that you can avoid really getting things, let's say, that would be offensive or that might not resonate with different groups. No one is completely perfect in this respect, but the important thing is improvement and reaching out and including people who would have more of an insight. And that's part of why some of the internal work in having diverse people who are both in your PTA as well as leadership and active would be important. Acknowledging and respecting cultural customs and traditions would be important. So knowing some of the nuances of the different communities, some of the potential important days, and this can be useful in terms of programming and events as well. To the extent possible, you could use some of these to have events, to have greater engagement from the different communities that are within your PTAs. And you want your messages to resonate in terms of the values and interests of the different cultural groups, and to also receive feedback to ensure that you are on the right track. And again, feedback is a good thing. Is finding and acknowledging mistakes would be good. We're not trying to simply have perfection at the first instance where we would reach out to groups. The important thing is continuous improvement. And one way in which we can tailor messages is to align them in terms of understanding of positioning of ideas within the world. And this would be in terms of context. One example, could say borrowed from psychology, would be the gap between low context and high context cultures, where low context cultures would be cultures in which ideas can be relatively abstract to be accepted as relevant or good in terms of messaging. So low context cultures such as the US and Canada would be cultures that are more likely to use direct communication, more likely to not assume that others have similar perspectives as the person giving off the message. So as a result, we can think of low context cultures as being more individualist, in contrast with high context cultures, which are more likely to examine things in their greater social and emotional context, where indirect communication, such as body language, would be more common, as well as situational awareness. So these are more likely to be collectivist cultures, where instead of relying on individual resources and individual actions, it would be more of an expectation of a community activity. So to put this in a way that's visual, so it's more relevant for our consideration, you can look towards ads. And we'll have a PTA specific example coming up as well, where if we examine a low context ad, we see that there are a couple of bottles of Coca-Cola and they are clinking against each other. And it's seen as an acceptable ad to encourage people to buy Coke. Whereas in a high context situation, we see more of a social and emotional understanding, social and emotional messaging with respect to it, where we see the two men, we see that they're smiling, so we see an emotional aspect to it as well, and they have the Cokes, and we also see towards the background be important in this high context ad as well, where we see that they are lanterns, so it's related to a Chinese cultural festival. To bring this more towards usage within PTA, you can see the use of flyers, where the low context flyer has Viva, so derived from Spanish, celebratory, and in the background we see some abstract images of violins. But if we have the high context ad, in contrast, we see Viva as well, but we see people, we see smiling, we see the social situation, we see them actually in the environment. So the usage of one versus the other can connote different messages depending on the people receiving them, and can have different impacts as well. So next we'll have some outreach towards specific demographic groups. So starting with Black or African American, then Hispanic and others. Sorry, there we go. It's muted. There we go. Yes, mute. Yeah. All right, if you can unmute April, that'd be helpful.
Am I unmuted now?
There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
My apologies, everyone. Acknowledging the historical and social context of the Black community experiences is very important, along with any culture's community experiences. And a lot of times our youth from all backgrounds would like to see, you know, celebratory events, special events that are highlighted and as a part of their community and a part of their families is very important to them. And a lot of times that's how you can definitely get communities or families to become more engaged into organizations like PTA. And we definitely want to make certain, once again, to be welcoming families into the spaces without any type of judgment, because it's indifferent than our own cultural traditions. And for example, we have Juneteenth and Black History Month, but also our local districts in most cases celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, and many others. The list goes on and on. So it's very important to respect cultural traditions and acknowledge them. As an educator of many years, I have many of my students that bring me various treats to school, and you know, I make sure that I embrace it, whatever it looks like, sounds like, smells like, as if it's something that I am going to definitely enjoy. And you know, it may be something indifferent than what I am familiar with, but I most definitely welcome it because it's something that they find important and important enough to share it with me. Representation and inclusivity goes directly hand in hand with DEIJ. You cannot have either of those and you cannot not have either of those components and consider that you are actively in support and alignment with DEIJ. Engage with local Black organizations and leaders to build trust and collaboration. That is something that can sometimes be a challenge for PTA organizations that do not have a high representation of African American or other ethnicities in their particular organization, but definitely don't shy away from it. You just have to identify yourself as what is the important mission and vision of the organization of PTA and reach out and connect. A lot of times they're waiting for you to connect with with their organizations. And oftentimes they're welcoming big ask from them as well to be in support and alignment with many of the pillars that PTAs have in place. And create platforms for Black voices to be heard and valued. Once again, you cannot be in alignment with DEIJ in the event that you do not allow spaces for Black voices or any voice to be heard to a place to where it feels valued.
Here's a map of population distribution of the Black community within Florida. So we see the highest numbers overall in terms of South Florida, as well as Tampa Bay, Polk County, Orange, as well as Duval. However, we see a Black percentage within all of the state of Florida. So next we have engagement with the Hispanic community, and it'll be important to acknowledge the diversity within the Hispanic community with the heavy emphasis on different nationalities. So I've covered the idea of Hispanic identity in another lecture that I've done, also in my classes. So I'm a sociologist outside of my work within PTA, and the majority of the students that I have are Hispanic American. And in surveys among them, as well as surveys from the Pew Research Center and others, the data shows that among members of the Hispanic community, the preference is largely in terms of the national group first, in terms of identifying in terms of self-identity, where someone would be much more likely to identify, let's say, as Cuban American or Nicaraguan American first, and then Hispanic American second. So if you, in your outreach, find that you have a large Hispanic community that, let's say, is not being encouraged to participate in PTA or is not currently active, then look towards the specific national groups. And it'd be helpful to find many of the cultural events and many of the cultural markers as really some of the key things to examine. Also, it would be important to, when possible, provide bilingual communication and resources to ensure inclusivity. Google Translate is becoming more sophisticated by the day. It is a free resource that you can use. Ideally, you would have a person do the translation, but Google Translate is there, so it's still a resource that should be utilized. Also, celebrating cultural events such as Hispanic Heritage Month, mentioned previously, would be useful in terms of showing PTA's commitment in terms of the Hispanic community. And just as before, collaborating with Hispanic community organizations. So with each of these sets of community organizations, you'll find that they exist. It's just a question of reaching out to them and communicating with them. And it can be very useful in terms of getting information and in terms of using collective resources. So here's a map as well. This is of the Hispanic percentage by county, where we see that the highest actual percentages would be in Osceola, Henry, as well as Miami-Dade County. And next would be Broward and Hillsborough and Orange. But we see a Hispanic presence throughout the state of Florida. So it's not simply an issue of Orlando southward. Hispanics are present throughout the state and have a historic presence throughout the state as well. So it'll be important to try to reach out to the Hispanic community, regardless of where you are in terms of position within the state. The same applies for the Haitian community for a number of those points, including the geographic distribution. So with the Haitian community and Haitian American community, it would be important to understand the unique cultural heritage, particularly in terms of pride of the nation of Haiti and the Haitian Revolution, and acknowledging the impact and importance of Haitian Creole as the dominant language within the community. So yes, French would be one of the official languages of Haiti. However, we see that Haitian Creole is actually the dominant usage, the dominant language that is used in daily speech. So having translation services, having people who are bilingual or multilingual who speak Haitian Creole would be of great use to PTAs trying to reach out to the Haitian community. As well, addressing some of the barriers, such as immigration status, some acculturation challenges as well, in terms of type of fear or a lack of comfort with respect to the school setting would be some of the challenges that should be addressed. But reaching out to Haitian community leaders can be helpful. Getting guidance and support would be useful as well. So if we examine the Haitian community within the state, we see that it's about 2%, so that's about 1 in 50, but we see geographic distribution that's pretty wide. So yes, we see the highest concentration in Northeast Miami-Dade, a couple of pockets in Broward and Palm Beach as well, but we see that the presence is everywhere, including in the Florida Panhandle.
The percentage of Florida students who self-identify as part of the LGBTQ community in 2019 is 7%. And I'm certain, possibly, just giving my personal plug here, that it's probably even more. It's just that a lot of youth just don't feel comfortable enough sharing that information openly as they did, I will just say, a year ago. The percentage who self-identify as transgender or non-binary in 2022, and you all can see the data here. And I'm going to just speak from a place of the classroom. So I am an educator in Hillsborough County that teaches middle school students. And I know when initially, before it became such a political realm about this specific topics, students felt that it was a safe space in order to share a lot of information with educators that they felt comfortable with doing so. But unfortunately, we have reached a space to where not so much, because the students in general just don't feel comfortable. And we're referencing adults, but we just want to also be reminded that our youth are dealing with this a lot more than is spoken about openly. I would just say just openly. So we can see that between the ages of 18 to 29, along with the color-coded diagram here that you have the rates that are listed there. And we could see that between the ages of 18 to 29, you have the 2.0 for trans man, trans woman. And then for the 18 to 29, you have the 3.0 for non-binary. But if we were to include ages that are between 17 and younger, those numbers would be much higher. And that's just based upon working with the youth for over 20 odd years.
So next we have engaging the white non-Hispanic community. This group does not get as much attention, typically in diversity outreach initiative, diversity outreach strategies, but it's a demographic group, just like every other demographic group, with its own cultural and social nuances, so it deserves to receive attention as well. And with this, the couple of nuances that we should look towards would be individualism and personal freedom, which are heavily emphasized within the white non-Hispanic community. As well, it's important to recognize the diversity within this community, including the rural-urban divide, where some of you are in cities, some of you are in smaller towns, and there's a difference in terms of lifestyle, in terms of overall culture between big cities and smaller towns. There will be religious diversity within the white non-Hispanic community. So if we examine the perspectives and activities, let's say, of the different denominations of Christianity, from Episcopalians to Roman Catholic, and we can also contrast that with people of Jewish descent or people who practice Judaism, we can see that there can be significant differences. As well, it's important to acknowledge socioeconomic diversity within the community. So just like all of the other groups we previously mentioned, which are not monoliths, the white non-Hispanic community would not be a monolith as well. So it would require some tailoring of specific messaging to people with different experiences. Sorry, if you could unmute.
I'm there again.
There we go.
So look, being no longer using this tool, inside the classroom has thrown me off completely. I'm sorry, you all. So again, to identify and address potential barriers that may hinder diverse populations is very important, because if you don't know what the problem is or what the barrier is, how can you go about making corrective measures to address those particular areas? Offer translation services, interpretation support, or language resources to the extent possible. And a lot of times you can do so by identifying a parent or individuals that is already currently a part of PTA to provide those services to you to the best of their ability. And a lot of times it may be viewed as embracing them and their culture and their differences and bringing it to the actual organization. Provide childcare services or accommodations for parents with young children. That's always going to be a plus, because many times when parents are already having to pick up the kids on their way home, the only thing that they can see at the end of that drive, at the end of their path, is to get home and get settled. But if you offer childcare within that space and some light bites within that space, a lot of times you're capable of capturing them for at least about an hour, hour and a half. Address financial barriers by offering scholarships or assistance for membership dues and events. I cannot stress that enough, coming from a school that is positioned in a very, very rural area. It's beginning to develop a lot more so now in the last 2 years than I could have ever imagined. But the majority of our students that attend our school come from socioeconomic challenged communities, I would consider the poorest community in our city, and they're bused to that area where they're now building, very expensive homes. The children that will be coming from the immediate demographic of the school, they may be capable of affording the memberships, but for those families that live, outside of that area, not so much. So therefore, you have to make sure that you don't put up the barriers so high to distance yourself from the students that are actually attending the school and the families that are being served. In order to build an inclusive PTA culture, You have to establish diversity, equity, and inclusion policies within the PTA's governing documents. It should be built in your foundation. It should be built in your foundation. If you do that pre-work, then you will have little area for grade to be capable to say that those areas are void within your organization. Incorporate diverse perspectives into decision-making process and policies and development. That's pretty self-explanatory. Organize diversity and inclusion training sessions for PTA members and volunteers. That goes along with what Nicholas was saying earlier on, based upon your population of membership and the student body that's being served and their families. You have to make sure that you identify the various languages. You have to be capable of identifying the various cultures that exist within the makeup of the PTA body, and then also the students that's being served. Foster a sense of belonging and community through inclusive social events and activities. That goes beyond just the PTA meetings. That goes when the school functions that PTA is sponsoring or playing an active role in, that they also allude to making sure that they also are very inclusive in the activities, demonstrate an array of various cultures in the events. And then continuously evaluate and improve the PTA's practices and policies to ensure inclusivity. You should not be starting with the same documents, doing the same social event and activities that you did 2 to 3 years ago, because definitely the population that you're serving for the school site, the community, and also the student demographics, I doubt that is exactly the same. So you should always be trying to evolve along with the students that's being served, the community that's being served, and the families, and even staff. All right, you also encourage diverse representation within the PTA leadership positions. So it can sometimes be a challenge to diverse the leadership for a specific PTA body at a school site, but you definitely should do your due diligence to try and solicit a body that represents the student body. I'll put it that way. And actively seek out and support individuals from underrepresented groups to assume leadership roles. Again, just because an individual don't speak the common language amongst the demographics at the school, that does not mean that they're uneducated or equipped to do so. So again, I'm trying to lure them in, even more so to be capable of, demonstrating that they too could be an active role in demonstrating that our students need to see them in those spaces so that they too can see that it's important to do so, that they need to be there. They need to exhibit that, you have a voice, you are important, and so on and so forth. Implement inclusive recruitment and nominations process. That goes without saying that you should not always want to see the same people in the same spaces and rotate in the roles, meaning that the president now becomes a treasurer now becomes a secretary, and so on and so forth. You want to actively try to demonstrate a recruitment process that is going to bring in new individuals. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with that, but it definitely should not become a norm. Provide training and resources to promote cultural competency and equity within the PTA leadership. We have been talking about that since the beginning of the presentation, the importance of the cultural competency and equity within anything that we're doing as it relates to PTA. So it serves the same, even more so with the PTA leadership.
So you want to encourage participation from all walks of life, from all of the different demographics within your school setting. So this includes having a environment where all voices are valued and encouraged. And to do this, you can provide opportunities for decision-making on the part of people who are in different groups. You wouldn't want a situation where all of the decision makers are from one demographic group, or even just 2 demographic groups, and all of the people who are subject to them or not even involved in PTA at all are part of a different demographic. So you want that to not be the case. You want diverse voices and diverse decision making. Culturally inclusive programming, which has been mentioned before, including activities that are tailored towards the specific groups in your cultural setting, as well as potentially developing a mentorship or buddy program. And this goes even beyond simply diversity outreach strategies, but it can be useful for all PTAs and all PTA situations where simply having a lunch with someone, or simply conducting an activity with PTA for someone who's new or potentially interested in joining can make a big difference in terms of people feeling as if they're valued and included, and just having that extra barrier removed from activity. Community partnerships can be useful in terms of understanding the nuances of the different communities within your school setting, but they can also be useful in terms of staying up to date with respect to activities in your community, but also in terms of technology and in terms of different events that are culturally relevant. So they're also good resources to act as sounding boards for ideas for events, or simply on the phone and having a conversation with some of these community members and who are part of other organizations can be useful. And say, well, would it be a good idea if we were to have an event centered around Cinco de Mayo, for instance? And you'll have a variety of different opinions, but you can use those different opinions to make a decision. There won't be whole unanimity in these in the feedback that you get, and that's perfectly fine and expected, because you'll find different viewpoints in the different groups that you'll engage, but you can nonetheless reach a consensus and nonetheless make decisions based off of the different factors that are brought up. These are also useful in terms of sharing resources and knowledge. And in creating these outreach strategies, you want to be able to measure their impact. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to use some sort of advanced statistical program. You can simply count the number of people who attend your events and see if there are changes over time with respect to that. You can also look towards the membership demographics to see if there are any changes with respect to those as well. The overall point is to continuously adapt and try to improve. Just like with some of the major tech companies that I mentioned in the earlier session, we examine the impact of Google or Facebook, now Meta. They have been able to stay on top of the technology field because they're continuously improving and using data to adapt. So you can all do the same, create a PTA version where you are examining your past activities. You are looking for whether they were successful or not based off of metrics that you've made. So say you wanted 20 people to attend an event, and let's say you got 19 people. You could say, well, we came very close. What can we do next time so we can get to 20 or more? So to do this, you can also stay informed about emerging trends. The community groups help to stay informed with those. Also, reading newspapers and articles is helpful, as well as seeking professional development opportunities. So attending workshops and workshops, think tanks, some classes such as on Coursera or edX.org. So on edX, you can get classes that would be fairly low cost. Some of them you can get for free, depending on specific circumstance. So there are numerous opportunities for knowledge. As well, some of them include additional resources. We have a couple of books as well as links. I believe those are in the chat area. So thank you for sending those. And to reach out to us, we have our email addresses here. And with that, let us open it up for questions and reactions. So, questions. comments are useful as well. But let's see if we get some in the chat area. Yes, Billy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Billy Austin from Duval County. Is it possible that you can go back to the slide with all of your contact information?
Okay, 1 second.
Thank you.
Right, so there's our email addresses.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's look. Okay, and Mel wants to get the resources, so let me go back to the resource slide. So thank you for being so engaged. This is excellent. So these are a couple of different books that are pretty useful from what I've seen and observed. So there's some strategies to approach DEIJ, so both internally as well as through external action. So hopefully one of the major points that we've been able to emphasize is that it requires both forming the environment as well as the collective mindset towards these activities within your PTA as an organization, but as well as trying to fine-tune some of the outreach strategies directly. Because you can have the best outreach strategy formulated in world history, but if your PTA is not committed to actually implementing them, then it won't be as useful. In the chat. Thank you, Mel. All right, so Mel got it, perfect. Okay, so additional questions. So one other point I wanted to emphasize is the extent to which identity is socially constructed. Where in the earlier session, I was able to, because of a question, describe the creation of Hispanic identity, where the concept of Hispanic did not exist formally in the United States until 1970 because of US government's creation, with this idea that you would have a large demographic of people who are descended from countries where Spanish is the dominant language. Before 1970, we would see that the emphasis would be on specific national groups on the part of the US government, where people would be described in terms of government records, say as being Mexican American or being Honduran American. Whereas after that, we had the Hispanic identity created in the US government as an ethnicity. And in fact, we still see today, as I mentioned before, the emphasis and identity would be on national heritage. Yes, Tiffany.
Just wondering if anyone has suggestions about how to engage potential DEIJ chairs, because there's a lot of questions about, the climate and if people want to get involved and be a DEIJ chair. Is there any specific things that we can point people to?
So want to reach out directly to the different county chairs, as well as have resources available on the PTA website. So we have the links posted in the chat areas. So that will be helpful. People can also reach out to myself, to April, as well as to Diana, who are all members of the committee. So that's one option. So I think that would cover it as well. But it looks like we have a comment here. Yes. Madam President.
So thank you. I want to respond to Tiffany's question. Tiffany, I think that in every community, in every council, there is that one person who most likely speaks up when it comes to issues where people are not being treated with equity. where situations aren't equitable. Generally speaking, there's at least one. Sometimes there are more. There are people for whom, like myself, diversity, equity, inclusion, and most recently justice are something that really resonates with us, and something that it is beyond just PTA. It is who we are and what we do. So most likely you have someone within your community, within your PTA, your council, who has demonstrated that, who some people may think, oh my God, here they go again, talking about equity and equality. But the person that you want to look for, because that's the person who is passionate about this work and who will give you their very best. Not to mention the tips that the committee is going to share with you too.
And I also would like to add to that a little bit, because I'm quite often in my space here in Hillsborough County viewed as one of those individuals that Madam President spoke about. And the reason that is so is because I speak to the issue of, if it's not what's best for kids, I don't care whatever the conversation is around. I want it to, the only alignment, it needs to be about what's best for kids. So if it's not what's best for all children, then that means that it's a problem. And if you want to consider me a troublemaker, great, I'm a good troublemaker because I'm doing what's best for children. So a lot of time when you frame the conversations around individuals that may have an interest in doing this type of work, and just share with them, you know, we all don't share the same perspectives, but we all should share the same value that if we do what's best for children, then our future outcome will be, you know, greatness. Other than that, we're setting them up for failure because they see us constantly. I won't get into that, but that's my plug there.
I would encourage the county councils as well as the local units to apply for our diversity awards. So you're already doing great work, so you should be rewarded for those, as well as inspire other people and other organizations, other PTAs to do the same. So the link is in the chat area, but as well, you'll receive a reminder later on in the school year to apply for those. So, and it just posted as well. So make sure you be on the lookout for those. So any additional questions or comments? Oh, we have people coming in now. It's excellent. Right, so if not, then we will thank you all for attending and hand it over to our president. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, April, Crystal. I think Diana's here again, and Karen, and all of the Education Commission for sharing with us great information about actually putting into practice what PTAs should be. And that means including everyone, whether you're a leader, whether you're a student, whether you're a parent. There's a place for everyone in PTA. And that was demonstrated this evening for you. Karen, would you like to close us out?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to the team and for everyone coming. I am going to put a few things in the post or in the chat. I want you to save the date. We can take these advocacy efforts that we're working on to Tallahassee and attend LegCon or the legislative conference. That registration will be opening soon. In addition, we want you to mark your calendars for our annual leadership convention, where you can enjoy classes similar to this or in various other areas of PTA leadership. And finally, I'd like to talk about the road to success, because even if you miss one, they are recorded, and I'm going to post the recording. And you can look at the list. It goes way back, but next Wednesday, we are going to focus on reflections, because all the counties and the schools are already gathering their submissions so that they can submit them to the state on time. And it's very exciting to see those posts on Facebook and everywhere. regarding reflections. Again, we thank you all for being here tonight, and you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.